according to Boston Consulting Group, 50% of the global workforce is burned out. I'm
Yeah.
like, how do we keep expecting people to show up and do more work and not generate waste and create good decisions and not operate out of fear when they're already painted into a corner that they can't get out of because nobody's extending them a path out of there?
Right. The beatings will continue until morale improves. Right. I mean, and that's where we are.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, the company's struggling, so we're just going to put more work on them. We're going to do more things. And rather than sit back and determine what is really going to have an impact, it's, hey, I got a good idea. Well, yeah, but how does it align? Do we look at it? I've talked about my 5 questions, right? How does it align with go-to-market? What are
Yeah.
the priorities with everything else we're already doing? How are we going to measure it? What's the KPI we're going to use that is actually one where you have a hypothesis of what it actually should be, right? So that we can figure out what is our goal. What do you want them to do? What do you actually want them to do? Make more calls, go on more visits, talk to me, whatever. And then the last is timing, right? Is now the right time in Q4 when you're trying to close the books, when you're coming up with a brand new idea? Hey, let's try this to close the year. No.
Welcome to the How to Not Execute Your Strategy podcast. I'm your host, Tim Ohai. These are the lessons that make you the leader you want to be. Go to timohai.com to learn more. My guest today is Sheevaun Thatcher. Sheevaun is literally a legend in the world of sales enablement globally, even earning a Lifetime Achievement Award from Selling Power. From a bag-carrying seller to a global pre-sales leader, and now running her own go-to-market strategic performance consultancy, she knows exactly what it takes to make a sales strategy come to life. In this conversation, we dig into why product-driven thinking and fear-based accountability crush sales execution and learn what to do instead. See the show notes for more information about Sheevaun and to also get access to the leader guide for this episode. Let's get to it. Sheevaun, I'm so glad you're here today, and I can't wait to get into this dialogue. I know you have a lot to share. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Tim. How are you? I'm excited to be here as well.
Oh, it's awesome. I will say it's a beautiful day in Hawaii as we record, enjoying the new year. I'm looking at all these horrible weather reports from the mainland, and I'm going, yeah, we don't have any of that.
No, I'm in California in the Bay Area, and it is beautiful here as well. It's mid 60s and the roses are blooming, and it's really nice.
Oh, that's good. That's good. All right. So let's just dive right in. The first question I ask everybody is essentially, tell me about a time where you had a strategy that didn't go as planned.
Well, when I first started out in my enablement career, there were a lot of ideas that I had that I figured as, and one of them was that enablement was just training, right? That it was all about training. It was all about certifications, and it was all about everybody had to go through all of this really heavy duty, PowerPoint heavy, WebEx heavy training in order for them to be able to go out and talk to customers. And so ran big certifications, very expensive certifications, and realized after a few of them just did not turn out, we didn't see the needle moving, that certifications aren't there for the salespeople. Certifications are there so I can say that people went through it. And that nobody cares about that. They just don't. I do, but that is not going to move the needle when it comes to performance and productivity, knowledge, customer alignment. It doesn't go to any of that.
Why do you think that was sponsored? I mean, because you can look at it now, and I've been in the game long enough. I know that these things they're trends. They come and they go. And you can go back, to the 80s, and people were doing the 70s, and some of these ideas were still back then. It's not new. It's weird to say 1900s. But with that said, why do you think that was sponsored? Why do you think leaders said, yep, go for it, take all of our people out of the field and go do this? What was going on in their minds?
I think they were not connected with their own field. They weren't connected with the field. They had not been out there to see what was going on. And there was a common belief, as you know, stuff rolls uphill sometimes. And there was a belief that the folks in the field didn't know what they were talking about. They're just not listening, right? Marketing and sales weren't aligned. It was, they're out there making up their own thing. And because of that, there was this belief that if we get them all in a room or we force them to sit and do this, in a lot of cases, really boring and non-aligned training, that then you can say they all know it. And so there's no excuse for them not to be able to have the conversations.
So
Where
was
in
it a
fact,
desire for accountability?
yeah,
I guess I'm trying to get underneath the psychology of it, because they want accountability, but you and I know that's really not even trust-based accountability. That's fear-based accountability. And even then, people will hide what's really going on when that kind of accountability is put in play. I think of like CRMs that have all this bad data because nobody really wants to tell the truth.
nobody
Inside
wants to
the
tell the
CRM.
truth. Yeah, nobody wants to tell the truth. Nobody wants to look like they don't know what they're doing. I don't know. I remember having a CRO come to me once, and he was really upset with me because he's like, "You didn't teach them anything, right? You didn't teach them anything." And I'm like, "Look, I have all the data that they attended, all of the sessions that I had. Look, I can show you the data." And he goes, "Well, why didn't they learn it?" I can tell you why they didn't learn it is because it wasn't aligned with what they wanted. And they simply minimized this particular window and went off and did everything else. They weren't paying any attention.
Was that situation something that could have been avoided? Or do you think you had to have the bad news in order to start changing the conversation?
Had to have the bad news. Had to
Yeah.
have the bad news. There was an absolute belief that certifications and making them do all of this extra training was going to change everything.
Mm.
And it just doesn't. It doesn't, because the training wasn't meant for them at all.
Man, I think of how many organizations, I mean, I'm reminded of Steve Jobs and the rock tumbler analogy. Just because you have a great idea does not mean that most of the work is done. Most of the work
Yeah.
is actually done in execution. And these great ideas, and whether they're great ideas or not, let's just move that to the side. The execution of it never seems to get enough airtime in the dialogue between senior executives and the people who work with them. It just doesn't seem that way in my career. Have you
Yeah,
had the
there's a
same?
combination of things that are tied in with that. One is the lack of communication between frontline managers and up on what really the issues that are being solved right now. The fear-based management means that a lot of those people don't want to tell the truth. They just give this rosy picture, and that's not really what it is. The other side of it is that there is a firm belief that whatever comes out of marketing and whatever the senior leadership has decided is the way we're going to go, everybody has to know that, and they have to know exactly the same talk track. They had to, like, there's this very large company based in California that has a yearly certification on a corporate deck.
Mm.
And when I looked at the corporate deck, I realized that there was very little in it that had to do with the customer. It was all about, hey, we're massive, we're huge.
Mm-hmm.
This is how you're going to talk about all of us. And they realized they were spending millions and millions. And then came down the edict that, and this was part of this, I was like, it's about time, which is the accountability aspect of it, where managers were supposed to be testing their own people on certification. But as you can imagine, they'd never done it before. Nobody knew how to do it. And I don't know how many times my team got pulled into meetings going, will you just do it for me, please? Just test all my people? As no,
Wow.
no, right? We're talking 30,000 people. No, I
Wow.
don't have a team. And so it became very expensive, and it just didn't work.
How much waste is generated because, let's just pick with what we've got: poor communication. And really what you're talking about is information flow up. It's the whole, what Toyota made famous of management by walking around. Get out there with your people. If your hands
Yeah,
aren't getting dirty, you're not doing your job right. But we have too many leaders who don't let their hands get dirty and aren't
right.
listening or getting that information. Two, you said fear-based leadership, which we've talked on. And then
Yeah.
the third thing was this idea of, I will call it complex strategy. We have a complex strategy, and maybe we've made it too complex, or we've over-engineered all the bits and to try and scale all the bits rather than saying, look, here are the core 3 things that you have to figure out or that you have to repeat, but everything else you figure out and make it work locally. If you put those 3 things into a bucket, how much waste percentage-wise would you say putting those 3 things together?
At least 50% of the business, at least 50%. And in some cases, I think it would be even higher. there is this belief that whatever marketing comes up with and our go-to-market strategy, for
We're gonna
example, is the way that we need to approach the market, which may be true. But here's where it falls apart, and it falls apart over and over again. It's why certifications and all these things don't work, is that what they failed to do is figure out what their customers are really asking for. And so every conversation, every PowerPoint deck, everything that is created is designed from the concept of, here is our product. Let's create everything around and all the questions and all the, objection handling and everything around our product, as opposed to, let's find out what these customers are really asking for and then start asking questions to dig into their pain so that what we tell them about actually solves something that they see as an issue, as opposed to something that may not be an issue for them, but we believe it is. And this is where all these certifications and a lot of the training that happens in these corporate decks and all, they're not designed for that conversation. They're designed for top of the funnel, right? I'm XYZ company. Here's what we do. We make widgets. That's what they're designed for. They're not designed for that. Hey, Tim, you got this consulting firm. What kind of challenges are you having getting through, at the end of the year? And none of that is in there.
I always think of it in terms of there's two journeys that we're trying to help people go through when it comes to generating revenue. One is clearly making a decision, but actually before that, do we need to do something? It's the whole prioritization discussions. Like, yeah, we know you exist. And I'll say a very large cloud company in California is famous for, we want you to know we exist. But when it actually gets into the details of, do you want to do that now? Are we a priority? I don't know how many sellers are actually taught how to have that conversation.
Right.
And then what winds up happening is, in the absence of information, people create their own. And it doesn't have to just be sales. It could be any function. People just start inventing their own answers to the questions they're getting to solve the challenges that they're dealing with on the daily. And that's what I hear you saying.
After that, it goes downhill.
Yeah.
I mean, there's conversations need to be around finding out what they consider to be value. What is value in the customer's mind? Do we have anything that aligns with that? And if we can't think of something, can we talk to them further to find out, can we create value in their mind of something that we do have that might help them? And if that doesn't work, can we reset a vision? Is there a vision that has been set by someone else or something that maybe they're just not seeing everything that's possible? Can we do that? And if we cannot do that, get out.
How do you change the dialogue with leaders so that you're at least minimizing, if not eliminating, the fear-based part of this bucket?
I think part of it, you and I have talked about this, and I know this is really prevalent to how you do business, is realizing that strategy is a plan, but it's a plan of decisions. As you said, it's a bunch of decisions, and decisions can be changed. You can determine which way you're going to go and what are you going to do. You and I talked a lot about this, are we trying to be disruptive or are we trying to be operational? Right? What are we trying to do? Are we trying to do both? If we are we trying to handle change management and scale at the same time? Okay, we can do that. But it's making them understand and showing the data about how much loss occurs when the proper types of relationships are not built with customers. And that loss is not just opportunity and revenue. The loss is actually the sellers as well. And that's a very high cost because that's already sunk cost. But the customers, you don't have that revenue yet. When you hire people and then put them into situations that are untenable for a year or more and they leave, that is millions of dollars against the bottom line in some cases.
If you were like most leaders, you learned how to execute strategy through trial and error, and your teammates learned the same way, if they've even learned it at all. The result is that how we execute our strategies generates massive waste and fatigue, but it doesn't have to be this way. If you'd like to master how strategies execute, go to timohai.com/masterclass now. You'll find everything I use to help my clients thrive all in one power-packed place. Don't you think it's time to invest in yourself? All right, back to the interview. So if you were to sprinkle magic pixie dust over everything and suddenly change 2 to 3 things about the leaders you're working with so that they would think differently, they would behave differently, they would make decisions differently, what would those 2 to 3 things be?
The first thing is to make it a customer first type of dialogue. That would be the very first thing. And
Why customer first as opposed to product first or revenue first or whatever?
in this day and age, companies are much more commoditized than they ever have been. And with AI and the way that AI can do all this research for you, whether or not what comes back is true or hallucination, people really don't know how to vet a lot of that, right? You have to be able to have those human conversations to be able to look different, sound different, get attention, right? Because the same email you're sending based on an AI search is also being sent by your competitors and everything else. And it's noise. There's chaos and noise. And so one is, first of all, understand who your customers are and what it is they're really looking for. Secondly, would be to make sure that marketing and sales are on the same page, because marketing, and it's not that marketing's not doing a great job. A lot of marketing is doing a fabulous job, top of the funnel. That's where I see it. Where we need to deal with marketing is in the product marketing part of it, which is actually, how do we spin? And I know spin can be a dirty word, but how do we spin the product in such a way that it does have alignment with the customers?
Yeah.
And how can we do it so that it is translatable? What's coming from marketing is translatable into customer speak. And you can't do that unless you know the customers already.
Okay. So
yeah,
if you want to bridge the gap between sales and marketing, is it really as simple as starting at the customer first and designing backwards?
I think there's also making sure that the folks that you've got that are leading the organization are ones that are capable of doing it. Right? Are they
Let's break that
actually,
open, because that's really the hard one.
right? I mean, are they coaches, or do they see themselves simply as bookkeepers? If they're just bookkeepers, then they're not helping anybody, because that's where the "what have you done for me lately" comes in. And that's just, no seller wants that. I want a manager and a senior leadership that is willing to coach me on what actually can work and will work based on their experience. And what I've seen over and over again is a lot of these managers get promoted into these positions because they're, super reps, for example. They're high performers. They're the type A type of performers who do a lot of these things naturally and have no clue on how to be able to tell people or actually explain what it is they're doing and why it works. And so that lack of coaching leads to a lack of accountability, leads to a lack of execution, because they don't know how to help their people execute.
There's so much. I mean, that right there, are you a coach or a bookkeeper? I'm literally picturing faces in my head of leaders that I know or knew who were bookkeepers 100%.
Yep.
They could give you the numbers. They could pull up the report. They could share the dashboard. They had talking points for each of the ugly parts of their dashboard. But when you actually said, okay, what are you doing to actually get out there with your people to help them to bring their best out? Crickets. No idea whatsoever.
They don't know. They see the numbers. They see what's coming in. They give people crap because it got to a level 4 and dropped off, but you didn't give them the opportunity to do the things they need to do to actually set it up right.
So that opens a door to a whole new topic, and that's this idea of, have we given our execution enough time? When I want to measure, I want to estimate how long will it take to not launch, but to produce results.
Yeah.
And that seems to be, I mean, we've both worked in Fortune 500, either as employee, or I've done it as employee and as consultant. That is not the way people think. They are so quick to launch Feb 1, Q3, whatever the target date is, and that's it. As soon as it launches, we're already moving on to the next initiative, and nothing ever truly gets baked and tested and refined and go back to the original rock tumbler. Nothing ever gets fixed so that it really is truly this powerful, game-changing idea that it started out as. It just becomes
there seems to be this belief that if you build it, they will come and do 100% of quota. No, it's going to take time, right? Change management is hard freaking
Yeah.
work. I would say that enablement more than anything else, that's what we
Mm,
do is change management, is
mm.
helping people understand that you got to keep the train on the track or the airplane's flying, whatever analogy
Yeah.
you want to use,
Yeah. Yeah.
but you also have to manage change. And change is the big one. Nobody likes change. People will always fall back to the lowest common denominator, always. And that doesn't matter whether they are a junior seller right out of college or whether it's somebody that's 40 years of experience. They run up against something and they're not comfortable with it, they're going to fall back. And so you have to allow the data to build. You have to allow the reintroduction of the information. So it's not a one and done, right? All these kickoffs and everything else are like, woohoo, we got them all. Yay, send them out. And then it's never heard of again. There has to be follow up. There has to be renewals of what it is they believe they learned. There has to be role playing. There has to be coaching. There has to be all of these things.
When you think of the leaders that you've worked with who have been very good at this, the leaders who have actually
Yep.
been best in class, the people you would go back to and work with in a heartbeat,
Yep.
what did they do differently that created these kind of corrections, that created these kind of expectations that people like, what your priority one is your people, get them doing what they need to be doing, and we'll get everything else in line as a secondary or even tertiary. But if your people are performing and your people are executing well, then I trust you're doing your job right. What separated those people from others?
From what you just said,
Yeah.
they took the time to find out about their people. Why do their people come to work every day? Why are they there? What is it that they're really after? And it's not loyalty to the company. That is not it. That's not there anymore. The days of the Ford and the Chrysler and being there for 45 years and getting a pension, those are gone.
Yeah.
Right. And so what do you know about your people? And then how can you incorporate that into how you lead them and coach them? And that includes, that's all the way up the hierarchy. It's not just, we're talking about frontline managers here. No, we're talking about their next level and their next level and their next level and their next level. And the other side of it is try not to be involved in every single deal. This is what I see is that you get VPs that want to have a QBR and go through every deal from every sales rep. And of course, the first rep gets up there and gets paddled for 4 hours. And then the next guns get 20 minutes if they get any, right? And so it's just, they're just focusing on the wrong things, I think is what it is.
It all goes back to, it sounds like fear, and people are running in fear. And fear, I mean, the research consistently shows, I think of the work of Ledoux and others, that fear is a prime factor in how we prioritize. And if we don't manage that fear, we will prioritize in really unhealthy ways. And then the rest of it is just a snowball of waste.
No, it's management by intimidation. I don't know, how many times have you seen that?
Yeah.
Right?
Or worse, leaders at the senior level fighting each other in turf wars because they have justified their arguments in their own heads and hearts because their fear got triggered, and they figured, if I don't do this, I'm going to fail or I'm going to be whatever. And it just creates dysfunction at the executive team level that then snowballs all the way out, in addition to the poor communication and the lack of true understanding around what's really happening on the front lines and all those other different things. You're now heaping hot coals on top of hot coals, making the fire and the heat even worse.
Yeah. Oh no, it's awful. It's popularity contests. You're all fighting for the same dime, and you've got leaders and founders that enjoy that. And I was like, no, it's toxic. It's horrible. And everybody, I'm sure, that's listening to this podcast has an example of that.
Oh, 100%. Or at least 75%. Global workforce is 75% disengaged or even actively disengaged.
Isn't that
People
amazing?
are frustrated.
What a number.
It's horrible. 50%, according to Boston Consulting Group, 50% of the global workforce is burned out. I'm like, how do we keep expecting people to show up and do more work and not generate waste and create good decisions and not operate out of fear when they're already painted into a corner that they can't get out of because nobody's extending them a path out of there?
Right. The beatings will continue until morale improves. Right. I mean, and that's where we are.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, the company's struggling, so we're just going to put more work on them. We're going to do more things. And rather than sit back and determine what is really going to have an impact, it's, hey, I got a good idea. Well, yeah, but how does it align? Do we look at it? I've talked about my 5 questions, right? How does it align with go-to-market? What are
Yeah.
the priorities with everything else we're already doing? How are we going to measure it? What's the KPI we're going to use that is actually one where you have a hypothesis of what it actually should be, right? So that we can figure out what is our goal. What do you want them to do? What do you actually want them to do? Make more calls, go on more visits, talk to me, whatever. And then the last is timing, right? Is now the right time in Q4 when you're trying to close the books, when you're coming up with a brand new idea? Hey, let's try this to close the year. No, you're putting something in Q4. It's not going to have any impact now. What are you doing? Push it.
Well, and people confuse timing with readiness, or they conflate. They put them together like that. This is the right time, but are we ready?
Yeah.
If the organization isn't ready, I don't care what you think the timing is. We weren't prepared. And why aren't we prepared? That's a whole nother set of questions. Like, we should have been prepared. Yeah, but is that on us to be prepared, or is that on you as the leader to make sure we're prepared before it happens, rather than going around during the fire drill? Wow.
Yeah. I mean, it's the groundwork that has to be set starting from the top all the way down.
Sheevaun, we could keep going and going and going on this just alone. The blame game that gets generated, the lack of genuine follow through and reinforcement. But I think we've covered a lot of ground, and I'm grateful that you gave us the 30 minutes that you have. I'm going to wrap us up. And if there's any final advice you would give out there to anybody who's trying to change the way their executives think, what would you say?
That would be to get to know the executives and be strategic partners with them. That is the linchpin that holds all of these programs together and makes not only the strategic definition of them and the decisions that are made, but also the execution and the success. If it's not there, it doesn't matter what you do, it won't work.
Thank you. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed that interview and got some solid takeaways. Here are 3 that I'd like to highlight. 1. Lead with customer insight, not product knowledge. Sales strategies break down when leaders confuse product knowledge with genuine customer value. Effective selling starts by deeply understanding customer priorities, pains, and goals, then shaping your messaging and execution to meet them where they are in their own journey. 2. Drive real alignment across sales, marketing, and leadership. Misalignment breeds waste, burnout, and disengagement. Aligning sales, marketing, and executives through frontline insights ensures your sales strategy translates clearly into customer conversations that resonate and results that stick. 3. Transform all sales leaders into coaches, not bookkeepers. When leaders fixate only on the numbers without coaching and developing their teams, performance stalls and culture suffers. Every sales leader must be a skilled coach who can empower their sales reps with the confidence, clarity, and competence they need to win. In closing, there are 3 things that I would ask of you. First, follow me on LinkedIn and subscribe to my LinkedIn newsletter. You'll get even more content that will both challenge and inspire you every week. Second, please share this podcast with at least one other person right now. And third, hit those rating stars on whatever platform you downloaded this podcast. When you do that, it raises the visibility of what we are talking about to people just like you. Holo mua, onward and upward.